Okay, good morning, everyone, and I'll call the committee of the whole meeting of Tuesday, March 17th, 2026, and declare all members of council are present. At this time, I will read our land acknowledgement. The municipality of the County of Kings is in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral, unceded, and current territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. The municipality of the County of Kings is a neighbor to Annapolis Valley First Nation and Glooscap First Nation, as well as a diverse urban and rural indigenous population. We are all treaty people and commit to upholding the peace and friendship treaties and working towards reconciliation in all areas of the municipalities. I want to welcome everyone here today, and we do have an agenda in front of you, Council. Is there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Allen, second by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay, motion carried. At this time, I would ask, is there any councillor that is considering declaring a conflict of interest on any of the items that we're discussing today? No? Okay, we will move on then to approval of the minutes of February 17th, 2026. Did anyone see any errors or omissions in those minutes? Okay, can I get a motion to approve those minutes, please? Moved by Councillor Peckford, second by Councillor Gates. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay, motion carried. Now we have the business arising from February 2026. Is there any business arising from those minutes? No? Okay, so first up on the agenda, we have we'd like to welcome the King's Senior Safety Society, and Trish Coleman will be presenting, and welcome, Trish.
Good morning. My name is Trish Coleman. I'm the Senior Safety Director for Kings County. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Same to you.
So thank you so much for letting us come in and speak about our program. It's been 3 years since we've been before you, so we always appreciate the opportunity to tell you about what we do. And I will move along quickly given our time. So our structure: we're a registered not-for-profit, and we have 2 staff. I'm the director. My position is full-time. Tricia Urquhart is our part-time coordinator, and we report to a volunteer board that oversees our program. And we have three board members with us today: Trinda Ernst and Kathy Hanks and Peter Kerr. And this is my opportunity to say what a wonderful, supportive, hardworking board I have behind me, and because of their work and commitment, we have a very strong program in Kings County. So our funding, so if you all have brochures in front of you, our funding is listed there, all the different sources: province, municipal units, foundations, and we rely heavily on in-kind donations. And again, this is my opportunity to say a thank you to all of you for the financial support that we receive. We absolutely could not operate without our grants and funding. And it's not just the dollar value attached to that, but it's also your 3-year commitment, which means a lot to us, and also just in the way we are able to plan, and for your support. The fact that you have committed to us for 3 years does make a big difference to us. Our mission statement: empowering seniors with knowledge and resources. And we do that in a number of ways. So our focus is on safety, and you'll see those 6 pillars there. That's also in the brochure. March is Fraud Awareness and Prevention Month, so that's our focus. That's our focus for this month, but also all year round. So what we do, I like to use these 3 focuses as a way to describe what our program does. We navigate, educate, and advocate. So we serve seniors 55 and up in Kings County, all over Kings County. We do home visits. We allow clients to self-refer, but we also get referrals from friends, family, neighbors, police, sometimes municipal counselors, constituency office staff, continuing care, adult protection, churches, all kinds of groups refer to us. And our goal is to help seniors stay in their own homes if they want to do that and if it's safe to do so. So when we are doing our home visits, we are looking at how we can help match seniors to services and programs, and that's our navigational role. So we fill out a lot of government forms, we make a lot of calls on behalf of clients, we help with funding, education around frauds and scams, and of course some of the more challenging cases around seniors living alone with dementia or unsafe properties or elder abuse. So we deal one-on-one with clients around that. A major part of our role in the last 3 years has been education, and so you will have a list at your places with the programming that we have done in the last 3 years around education. So presentations, our staff is available to do presentations on a number of topics. So we talk about frauds and scams, seniors toolbox, personal safety and security, wills and estates, and then we have academies where we bring in speakers to talk on things that Tricia and I don't talk on ourselves. So 211, false prevention, emergency measures, all sorts of things. And we have some panel discussions as well. So we've worked really hard to get a panel together to do a driving decisions panel. So we have one coming up the end of April, and those are really popular. It's a discussion around when it's time to give up driving. So we have someone from DMV, RCMP, the Alzheimer's Society, and our driving instructors come in for that. So we know that education goes a long way in preventing some of the urgencies and hard cases that we see. So that's our education role. And then we advocate on behalf of seniors. So our staff and our board are often asked to sit at a number of different tables where our input is sought and where we are able to speak about how seniors are affected by the decisions that get made. And then on an individual basis, we are often asked to advocate on behalf of a senior, so it might be letter writing, phone calls, that kind of thing, to make sure that their voice is heard. So we're really pleased and proud of the events that we've been able to put on and the people that we've been able to reach through all of our events. So safety academies, we do one in the spring, one in the fall. We have one coming up in Berwick. We have a Living Alone Academy coming up in Wolfville in May, and you'll see on the list there of all the ones that we've done around the county. I've talked about our presentations that we do, so we will go to any group, big or small, church groups. We've spoken to the Red Hatters and Tops groups, and just about anybody who will ask us to come in and speak. We've been doing a series around the entire county and the seniors complexes. So we did frauds and scams 2 winters ago. This year we're talking about our program and Vial of Life and EHS services. A driver refresher is very popular. It's in-class learning for the day. We do a shredding event in the spring and the fall, and if we're fortunate, we might be able to do another one in there. I've talked about driving decisions. Our Letters to an Elder just finished up. February 26th is Letters to an Elder Day, and if you follow us on Facebook, you've seen the absolutely gorgeous letters that we mailed and hand-delivered to seniors. We also do Valentine's and Christmas cards as well that are all prepared by students. Our Vial of Life is a very important program that we administer, and you all have one at your place setting, so it helps first responders to know your medications, if you live alone in particular or can't express or remember what your medications, dosages, allergies, emergency contacts. So that little vial goes in your fridge and first responders know to look there. And also we have a quarterly newsletter, so we didn't have that the last time we were here, so it's something relatively new. It comes out obviously every 3 months, so our next one is out in May. And if you would like to sign up for that, please just send an email to Tricia. Her email is on the brochure, and she's the one that looks after getting those distributed. And we have over 700 people now on our email list, so we work really hard to get our information about our programs out. And we really make a difference. So a couple of things I'd like to highlight. We aren't a social committee. We don't do friendly visits or offer social activities. But at one of our academies, one of our attendees made a friend at our coffee time that we build into our program, 2 widows, and they had connected over the course of the 4 weeks. And one of them told Tricia that she was very happy that she would be able to connect with this lady. They had agreed that they would meet up afterwards. So that's a bonus. We know that loneliness and isolation is one of the risk factors for seniors. We have a client in Port Williams that was just absolutely drowning in debt, and we worked with her over a period of time to help her pay down that debt. And one of her major barriers to programming was her property taxes. So you folks have a wonderful property tax rebate program, and it's one of the few ones where you are allowed to apply for the rebate even if you haven't paid all of your taxes in full, which I think really is the best way to go. So we helped her pay off her property tax, which meant that she could then apply for the provincial property tax rebate and also for a home repair grant. So she's still in her home. Some of the safety concerns have been addressed, and I continue to check in with her to help with the seniors care grants and the heat rebates and those things. We had an academy, and we almost always have Muriel Toole from the province come and speak about home repair grants. So at one of our academies, a woman came up to me after the fact and said that she had had the home repair grant application for 2 years and found the paperwork just too overwhelming to do. So then she said, and now I know I can get you to help me with that. So that was a real win. Again, prevention is key. There's waiting lists for a lot of these programs, and if we're able to help folks connect to this, we're really doing our job. And then I did speak a bit about the Letters to an Elder. So we just finished that up, and we mailed them around the county. And Tricia was making a visit to someone who had just received her letter, and she was all teary about it. They really are lovely. And she said it was just what she needed on that day. She's been really struggling with a lot of things. And of course, we're coming into spring, and some of the things that we see with loneliness and the just the dreary days, I'm hoping are going to be alleviated a little bit. So that's it in a nutshell of what we do and what we're about, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Coleman. We're certainly pleased to support your organization with the 3-year commitment with all you do. And I know that I attended one of your sessions on a Wednesday at the fire hall, and I was very, very impressed, and I hope to get back down again sometime soon, but you certainly do great work. So is there anyone from council that has any questions to Mrs. Coleman? I guess you were pretty clear. Not only that, you were
Under my 10?
on time and everything, so we really appreciate that. Maybe before we go to the recommendation, would you like to introduce the people that you brought with you?
Yes, yes. So we have 3 of our board members here. Trinda Ernst, and Pete Kerr, and Kathy Hanks. Okay. So we have a number of committees on our board. Human Resources, Policy and Procedures, Strategic Planning. Kathy has been absolutely phenomenal heading up our IT. I really am not technically inclined in any way, so we've made a lot of advances that way. We have a new website coming, so we're really Pete's has served on our executive and a number of our other committees. Trinda, I don't even remember what committees you serve on now. Planning, yeah. Yeah, Trinda's a lawyer, as you all know, so we really have a wonderful board.
Well, great, and thank you, and thank
you
for
very
coming,
much.
and thank you for all what you do. Okay, so we have a recommendation, council, that Committee of the Whole receive for information the Senior Safety Society presentation as provided on March 17th, 2026. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor McPherson, second by Councillor Hiltz. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay, motion carried. All right, we will move on to next item on our agenda is financial services. Our proposed operating budget and water budget. Mr. Mike Livingston, our Director of Finance, is going to kick things off, and after him, Katrina Roof, our financial analyst, will cover the details. So, Mr. Livingston. Stone. Well, you don't have to leave. It's just getting interesting.
I have a priority access application.
That's what they all say. They all tell us the same thing. Thank you. You have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Council. Before I get started today, I want to give some recognition to our financial reporting team. So that includes Katrina Roofs, Chris Ritchie, Kevin Wheaton, Brittany Cleveland, and Tyler Honeywood. I'd also like to recognize Scott McKay and the rest of the Revenue Division team. It takes a lot of effort to bring together the annual budget, and I think you'll see their hard work in this year's 26-27 operating capital budgets. Today, I'll present a short introduction to the 26-27 operating budget and then pass things over to Katrina, who will walk you through a more detailed look at the operating budget. Today's presentation will not cover the 26-27 capital budget, but we will provide a separate presentation next week on Wednesday, March 25th. The capital budget presentation will cover proposed projects and the details of the proposed use of grants, debt, reserves, and other sources of project funding. As we work our way through the operating presentation, we'll be happy to address whatever questions you have, and we'll stop to take them as we work our way through section by section. I'll start with the legislative framework. Municipalities in Nova Scotia are subject to legislated requirements when it comes to preparing and approving annual budgets, most notably the Municipal Government Act, and as a regulation to the Act, the Financial Reporting and Accounting Manual. Municipalities are not allowed to approve a deficit budget. The budget must balance the estimated expense requirements with equal revenue through the approval of sufficient tax rates. Also, municipalities are not allowed to balance annual budgets with the use of long-term debt. Deficits must be eliminated with tax, other revenues, or a reserve transfer. Municipalities are also required to maintain distinct funds, which are separate, self-contained accounting entities. The most straightforward example is probably the separation of the general municipal operations from the operations of the Greenwood Water Utility. Water revenues of the utility are maintained within its own fund and would only be used to cover water utility related costs, never the cost of the municipality's general operating fund. The municipality maintains a set of 8 funds. On the slide here, you'll see in our general section, the general operating fund, the general capital fund, general operating reserve fund, the general capital reserve fund, in the water utility section, an operating fund and a capital fund, and in the regional sewer section, an operating fund and capital fund as well. Today's presentation will be covering the 3 operating funds and the general operating reserve. The finance team, for the most part, follows a budget preparation framework in line with the points on this slide. The individual departments and divisions are consulted to understand their budgetary needs for the coming year, and this often includes an examination of historical trends, and forward-looking conversations are also had. At the same time, the team is gathering information on mandatory cost expectations, budgets from IMSAs like Valley Waste and Tidal Transit, and budgets from other third parties like the 13 local fire departments. Various contract-driven costs, like the annual price increase for things like software licensing, all the way through to things like union-negotiated compensation increases, are updated. Policy-driven costs are reevaluated and incorporated into the budget. Examples include things like grant programs and non-union compensation. As the capital budget is finalized, the impacts of that budget are factored into the operating budget. One example is the required debt service, which is covered by the operating budget. Tax and other revenue estimates can be prepared once the municipality receives the assessment roll from Property Valuation Services Corporation, or PVSC. As the various elements of the proposed budget come together, it's evaluated against the provincial financial condition indicators and any thresholds set out in municipal policy. Further revisions are made to best align the budget with these targets. Now some key considerations for the 26-27 operating budget. The required tax revenue growth in 26-27 will be generated entirely by assessment lift. Assessment lift can be described as the incremental tax revenue produced by increases in assessed property value multiplied by the prior year tax rate. For residential property, overall assessments have increased by 7.9%. Capped properties would be limited to a maximum increase of 2.6%, while new construction and properties where a cap has been removed have brought about the overall increase of 7.9%. Commercial property assessment has an overall increase of 3.4%, and those properties are not eligible for cap. The 26-27 budget proposes no change to either the residential or commercial tax rates, but we believe the assessment lift will cover increasing costs due to the ever-present factor of price inflation, produce sufficient revenue to offset increases to mandatory costs like the education contribution, and build capacity to afford the expanding scope of capital costs for things like accessibility, responses to climate change, and housing-related infrastructure needs. Capacity also needs to be built to prepare for the cost of major capital requirements anticipated in the short, medium, and long term. To aid in that capacity, building, the municipality implemented de-transfer tax. In 26-27, it will be the first full fiscal cycle with the de-transfer tax in place. Some final key considerations include keeping departmental budgets to the same inflationary factor as used for the CAP program, that key inflation rate of 2.6%. This includes maintaining the existing 25-26 staff levels throughout 26-27. This in part is possible as a result of capitalizing on opportunities like the Housing Accelerator Fund, and we intend to continue to seek out similar opportunities during 26-27. This table looks at proposed budget expenses to help illustrate the key considerations of the 26-27 operating budget. We can start by focusing on the change percentage in the far right-hand column and bearing in mind that key inflation factor of 2.6%, which is the October to October Nova Scotia all items CPI measure. Mandatory expenses are expected to outpace CPI with a 4% increase year over year. These costs are costs that the municipality has no discretion to avoid. IMSA contributions show a welcome 7% reduction. That can be attributed to Valley Waste and EPR, which stands for End Producer Responsibility, and is a program that changes the way recycled materials are handled and paid for. Tidal Transit, or formerly King's Transit, is partially offsetting the benefit from EPR in 26-27, as the public transit providers facing significant price increases to modernize operations and replace its aged fleet. Fire departments are awaiting further information from the province about modernization of Nova Scotia Fire Services, and in the meantime, the municipality is in the process of updating service agreements with its 13 local departments. Price increases for fire services are outpacing the key measure of inflation in 26-27 at just under 5%. By policy, the municipality's sewer rate is indexed annually by the October all items CPI at 2.6%. In 26-27, we expect greater price increases at 3.5%. In 26-27, we'll determine whether the long-term sewer model prepared back in 2021 needs to be revisited and what impacts that could have in 27-28 and beyond. Departmental expenses are expected to increase in line with that 2.6% key measure of inflation. In 26-27, the municipality will continue to roll out its Housing Accelerator program. These costs are federally subsidized through the Housing Accelerator Fund. The next line for special projects are showing a decline of just under 37%. These are generally projects tied to the municipality's strategic focuses and strategic plan and don't typically align with the annual budget cycle. You'll receive more information on those projects next week when we cover the capital budget. Municipal grant programs capture a wide variety of offerings from the not-for-profit tax exemption through to the Village Infrastructure Grant Program, known as VICE. The 5.6% increase is mostly the result of the increase to the low-income personal property tax reduction program, which was discussed earlier. Debt service requirements will fall 10.5% in 26-27. As the outstanding balance of debentures slowly declines, the required principal and interest payments will decline as well. And you can expect to see more discussion on debt when we talk about the capital budget next week. The final four lines address various transfers to reserves. After normalizing for 3 newly introduced transfers, the bottom 3, the remaining transfers to operating and capital reserves are increasing by just 3.1%. Included in the value of the transfers to those reserves is an enhanced capital reserve contribution of $1,655,000, which is intended to bring the general rate capital reserves closer in line with its policy recommended balance. The other 3 lines, the first one, the transfer to de-transfer tax reserve, is of course a new factor and is done in line with policy. All de-transfer tax revenue collected is transferred to the de-transfer tax reserve. The transfer to the vice reserve is related to the village infrastructure program, where unspent annual contributions to the villages are set aside for them in the future in that reserve. And then the transfer to capital from special projects reserve is a new transfer this year that certain funds that have been set aside previously in our special projects reserve are being moved over to the capital reserve for use for those capital projects. And together, all those costs form the total proposed expense budget for 26-27 at $76,672,000. The core of the 26-27 budget can be characterized as a budget of organic growth, building capacity with existing internal resources. We're holding the line on tax rates, maintaining the existing staff complement, and keeping departmental spending increases in line with year-over-year price inflation. In 26-27, D-transfer tax will not be used in operations. Instead, it will be earmarked for the future to address infrastructure at risk, end-of-life infrastructure, advancing council's strategic plan, active living infrastructure and programs, and projects supporting improved efficiency and operational cost savings. The federally subsidized Housing Accelerator Program will support the municipality through infrastructure enhancements supporting housing growth and streamlining approval processes for proposed housing developments. Finally, another year of enhanced capital reserve contributions will support infrastructure needs in the future and help maintain stable future tax rates. I'm happy to take any questions you may have on this introductory information before I pass things over to Katrina, who will go through the operating budget in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Livingston. And before we get into any questions, I just want to reiterate that Katrina will be giving us more detail, so it's quite possible that some of your questions may be answered by Katrina in her presentation when she comes up. So, but certainly we're welcome to ask our director any questions at this time, but I just thought I'd mention that in maybe saving some time. Councillor Gates.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question for clarification. Has there been a recent water rate study done? I know we're under the water utility, but can you tell me when the last water rate study was done?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gates. The last rate study was done sometime back around 2014, and we are going to be preparing a rate study in 26-27.
Perfect, that answers that. I just have another quick question for clarification. Sure. With the increase in the property values, and I see approximately 6.6 million increase in value, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are you just looking at the year-over-year difference
in
tax revenue? So what's important to note is the inclusion of D-transfer tax revenue in that value.
3 million approximately? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this is probably a question for the director. I'm just curious as to whether or not you anticipate or you know if any of the provincial reductions recently presented in the provincial budget will have any impact on our operating budget here in the municipality.
Once again, through you, Mr. Mayor, we're comfortable that the vast majority of our existing agreements will not be impacted by those recent changes. There was looking like there might be some impacts flowing up through, for example, tidal transit, although it seems like some of those have been walked back in the provincial sort of revisit. It will absolutely have a factor going forward. There's been infrastructure programs removed like PCAP. So, you know, we'll see additional needs come through villages. They tend to rely more on PCAP type funding, but it is a bit of an uncertainty going forward.
Okay. Well, I'd say you did a great job, Mr. Livingstone, and so that was very informative, but we'll reserve the right to bring you back up if Katrina tells us something we don't like to hear. How's that? Katrina, welcome.
So good morning, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm going to walk you through the details of our $76 million operating budget. which represents, as Mike mentioned, a 9.8% increase over last year. Any key variances over 5%, we've detailed in pages 42 and 43 of your agenda package. So those pages really go over any of the high-level budget increases over 5%. And through the body of my presentation, when I refer to a page number, I am referencing the agenda page number, not the actual document page number. So we'll start with the revenues, which begin on page 44 of the agenda package. And for 26-27, again, the 9.8% increase. The municipality's general operations has 6 revenue streams that we break out. And of course, the most significant being property tax, which makes up 77.8% of the total budget. And the following slides will provide details on each of these streams. So property tax, again, our biggest revenue stream, has a budget of $59.6 million, which includes just over $3 million related to the new revenue stream of deed transfer tax. This represents a 12.4% increase over prior year, or with deed transfer tax normalized out, we'd be looking at about 6.7% of an increase. Tax revenue is calculated by applying our rates to the assessed values provided by the Property Valuation Service Corporation, and then applying a historical average of appeal rates. Our next revenue stream is our PILT, or Payments in Lieu of Taxes, which can be seen on page 46 of the agenda package. PILTs are funds collected on provincially or federally owned and assessed properties within the municipality. And as the name would imply, rather than paying taxes, the other levels of government provide these payments in lieu of annual filings from municipalities. The 26-27 budget for these is increasing by 4.5%, which relates to updated property assessment information, including any new properties, and updated historical collection rates for federal properties. Next, we have interest revenue, which just comes in at over $1.7 million. It's generated from 2 primary sources, interest on overdue accounts and interest earned on our bank deposits, net of the balances held in the other funds. So the capital fund would have its own interest, capital reserves, things like that. Interest earned on bank balances is based on average balances for the past 12 months, and then anticipated interest rates, which are tied to the Bank of Canada. The 26-27 budget forecasts less volatility in rates, so we're anticipating the Bank of Canada is likely going to hold their rates sort of where they're at right now. The last revenue stream that we'll look at is our departmental revenues. So departmental revenues are generated through the sales of services, services provided to other governments, and grant funding. So a combination of historic averages, planned activity, and other known or estimated inputs are used to develop these budgets. And departmental revenue is budgeted to grow by 22.2%. And it's broken down on this slide by each department. Now, the primary driver relates to the recognized Housing Accelerator grant funds, HAF, which total over $1.79 million. And are detailed on page 100 and 101 of the budget document, or the agenda. After normalizing for half, the increase in departmental revenue is closer to 2.1%, which is spread over all departments, with the municipal sewer making up the bulk of the remaining growth at 3.1% over prior years, which is driven by an index sewer rate, new connections, and cost recoveries from other units. Details and breakdowns of individual departments are seen throughout the body of the report attached to the agenda package. So before moving on to the expenditure side of the budget, I'd like to loop back and cover some of the property tax related information and trends. The material can be found beginning on page 48 of the agenda package. And the slide in front of you details the municipality's various tax rates, which are unchanged within the proposed budget. The chart at the bottom of the slide details the impact that 1 cent rate adjustment would have on revenues. So if we were to adjust the tax rate by 1 cent, residential revenue would change by about $519,000, and the average residential tax bill would change by about $21. The commercial adjustment would impact revenues by about $46,000 if we were to change the rate by 1 cent either way. And again, this year's budget has no anticipated rate changes. So we'll start on page 49 of the agenda package with figure 10, which details tax revenue growth broken down between the 3 major streams. So we have residential, commercial, and resource. And this chart demonstrates revenue growth for each class of property over 5 years. All increases are the result of assessment growth only, and the annual budgeted revenue growth for each of the main classes for the current year, we have residential at 7.9%, commercial at 3.4%, and resource at 5.6%. Next, we have uniform assessment, which is often abbreviated to UA, and this is the municipality's total taxable property assessment. Uniform assessment is a driving factor for several cost-sharing agreements, grants, and mandatory provincial expenses, such as the education contribution. So the chart on this slide, which is figure 11 on page 50 of the agenda package, compares the historical change in uniform assessment for the municipalities, rural Nova Scotian municipalities, and then all Nova Scotian municipalities. So the municipality for the most recent year has a 5.5% growth in uniform assessment factored into the budget for 26-27. Information for rural municipalities and the other municipalities throughout the province is not yet available. So we've done a comparison of the 25-26 year. Uniform assessment is an important factor to predict increases to certain mandatory payments, as well as ensuring the assessment growth within the municipality keeps pace with the rest of the province. So we want to make sure that we're keeping track with other areas of the province. So now we'll look specifically at residential assessment. This chart on page 12 of, this is figure 12 on page 51 of the agenda package. Shows the 5-year growth in residential assessment, separated by the green portion would be the capped portion each of the 5 years, and the yellow portion would be the portion that's rising because of property sales, major renovations. For 26-27, the increase in capped assessment is 2.6%, which is above the 1.5% that we saw last year, but is continuing to normalize from the highs that we're seeing in 22 and 24. The increase in capped assessment for 26-27 will result in an average increase of about $45 on the annual tax bill of the municipality's average residential property assessment. Additional growth related to property sales, new construction, and major renovation remains strong at 5.3%, which is consistent with the past few years. Next, we'll look at commercial assessment, which had a 3.4% growth for 26-27, as shown in figure 14 on page 53 of the agenda. Following a decrease of $11 million, or 2.4% in 2025, the municipality's 2026 commercial assessment roll has increased by $15.5 million, or 3.4%. The growth in the assessment roll came from 2 sources. There were 19 new commercial assessment accounts, which represented $5.3 million in assessed value being added. And then approximately 600 accounts had increases in assessed value that totaled just under $18 million. The increases have been offset by the removal of 18 commercial accounts with a total assessed value of just over $2 million, And 1/3 commercial accounts had decreases in assessed value. That represented decreases of about $6.1 million. So all of that together has a net increase of 3.4% for this year. So if I'm going too fast, you can let me know.
Oh, you're doing fine.
Good, okay. So property assessment, which we've just discussed, is one component of the tax formula. And now we'll look at the other part, the municipality's residential and commercial tax rates, starting with residential. So the chart on this slide, which is figure 16 on page 56 of the agenda, compares the tax rate plus the applicable area rates for properties in different locations of the municipality, as well as the 3 local towns. The municipality's residential tax rate is below each of the neighboring towns and is also 13.6 cents below the average rate for rural municipalities in Nova Scotia, which can be seen on page 55 of the agenda package. I don't have the chart here, but there's a chart that compares us to other rural municipalities within the province. So while comparison of rates to other municipalities is important to ensure that we're keeping pace and remaining competitive, affordability is also something that must be considered. Figure 17 on page 57 of the agenda package examines this through the calculation of the residential tax effort. So residential tax effort is the average property tax burden per household in the municipality. It's calculated by the province as total residential property tax, including the sewer rate, divided by the number of dwelling units expressed as a percentage of the median household income in the municipality. So what it's trying to convey is that how much of a household's income would be directed to property tax. And the province would consider a residential tax effort below 4% as a threshold for low risk, so that would make us very healthy. The municipality's residential tax effort was 2.3% in 23-24, which aligns with the rural average and remains within the provincial threshold. So the chart on the screen uses 23-24 information, which is the last year that the province has released so that we could use comparable information. Based on audited financial information and preliminary provincial reporting on our end, the tax effort increased modestly to 2.5% in the 24-25 fiscal year. So looking at our last set of audited figures and running the calculation from the province, we're doing a preliminary calculation of about 2.5%. So still well within the 4% threshold. Next, we'll look at the commercial tax rate, which at 2.287 is also lower than the 3 local towns, but above the rural municipal average, which is 2.106. Figure 19 on page 59 of the agenda shows a commercial rate comparison throughout the municipality, while figure 18 on page 58 compares us to other rural municipalities. And it should be noted that the municipality's commercial tax base is highly concentrated, with a single large commercial account representing close to 12.6% of the total commercial assessment. And additionally, the highest assessed 5% of commercial accounts contribute more than 50.9% of all commercial tax revenue. So as a result, any adjustments to the commercial tax rate would disproportionately affect the larger commercial enterprises. So now, if there's no questions on any of the assessment.
Okay, so you want to stop at this point
If you
for
would like.
questions? Okay, thank you, Katrina, and Councillor Gates.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Good presentation, Katrina. Just a quick question for clarification. It looks like for every penny of assessment in the past, we've generated $430,000 for every penny of assessment. It looks like we're at $520,000 for every penny, which is an increase of about $90,000. Is that correct? Am I crunching the correct numbers on that one?
The current year number is correct. I would have to go and look at last year's
Thank you.
budget to
Yeah.
see the exact amount that it was last year, but this will grow annually with the rising assessment roll, so it will organically grow
Which
as
is
the
higher than
assessment
the
roll
average of
grows.
3%, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And just for clarification, the approximate deed transfer tax revenues right now is more of a guesstimate? Is that,
Yeah, so we used the past few years of sales data
right?
and then a conservative estimate of what we might see this year, factoring in that the market may be slowing. And so we were conservative. We came out to an estimate between, I believe, 3 and 4 million, and we used the lower end of the.
Thank you.
Notice that my first impression is we're doing pretty darn good comparably residentially, but unfortunately our commercial has been down as far as new commercial, and we're depending on a couple, 2 or 3 large commercial operations. So to I guess help get that up, building things is the way to go, and to see more commercial development. But that's probably our weakest link is in commercial development. Would that be a fair statement?
So last year we had negative growth in commercial assessment, and this year we are going back up, which is a positive sign. One thing to note, and Scott McKay can correct me if I'm wrong, but income also plays into commercial assessment. So other economic factors other than just the assessed value of a property, the market value, play into commercial assessment. And of course, there's no cap. So we do tend to see some fluctuation there every year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sappington.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. With the suggested changes with fire and policing, I was wondering, how do you even begin to estimate what the changes may cost when we don't even know what those changes are going to be for sure?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sappington, with the policing, there has been a lot of fluctuation in the past 5 years, specifically as they settled a collective agreement a few years ago. So what we've done is I've taken a 2-year average of growth, which is averaged around just over 6%. And then I did check with the Department of Justice. They were not able to give us a budget estimate at this time. But we do feel like past what we've seen in the past few years, what we've seen with the growth. I've also confirmed with a few other local municipalities what they've been using in their budgets, and it is comparable to that. So yes, it is an estimate. We could get a letter from them in May, and it could be different from that, but at this time, it's the best information we have. With regard to the fire departments, we've used calculations based on the current contract agreements, and there is a slide later on which will detail the fire departments, and we have also built in some contingent funds for ongoing contract negotiations. But with regard to the provincial announcement, we haven't built anything in at this time because there's too many unknowns.
Councillor Lutz.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Thanks for your presentation thus far. Just a quick question about, with the introduction of the deed transfer tax, our transfers to reserves, we're treating that as a transfer to reserve. So that's going to inflate our transfers to reserves. Does that have any impact on the way we report things? Does it artificially inflate? Because we haven't had it before, so it's not really, it's hard to compare, past years with this year. So does that artificially inflate, or does inflate, not artificially, those transfers in comparison? And does that affect our reporting, like our financial condition index, like those types of numbers?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lutz, later in the presentation and as detailed in the operating reserve section of the agenda package, there are several thresholds that we calculate to determine the health of our reserves. And the one that the province uses is a combined reserve model. So in that case, the deed transfer tax would flow in. Our own policy thresholds, though, we have a few that are listed in the reserve policy, and one of the main ones, looks only at the general operating reserve and uses that as the baseline for how much we have in reserve for sort of a true emergency or an unplanned project or something like that.
Awesome, thank you.
Good question, Lo. I guess you can carry on, Katrina. Thank
Okay,
you.
wonderful. So now we're going to move into the operating expenditure portion of the budget, which will begin on page 60 of your agendas. And the pie chart on this slide just shows the allocation of each dollar of revenue sort of into the higher level buckets of groups. And we'll discuss each section on the following slides. So our first group, and one of our largest, our largest, we'll look at mandatory payments, which are detailed starting on page 62 of the agenda. So mandatory payments are items that the municipality has no discretion over and are a combined 40.5% of total expenditures. And again, they form the largest group within the budget. So we'll start with the education contribution. Has increased 4.1% based on changes in uniform assessment, and then divided by the student enrollment figures provided by the AVRCE. And on the bar chart here, you can see we've divided each of these lines is the current year budget in green, the 25-26 forecast in yellow, and then the 25-26 budget in pink for each of the categories within the department. So in this case, education, RCMP. The RCMP amount is estimated to increase 6.6% based on historic trends. Again, the Department of Justice was not able to confirm prior to budget release, so this may fluctuate after year end, but we're hoping that it should be in line with where it needs to be. Regarding the regional library, funding has not changed under the provincially established funding model, which sets municipal contribution requirements. However, in 26-27, a provisional increase of 7.6% has been included should the province update their model. And then we have the municipality's contribution to the maintenance of local roads owned by the province of Nova Scotia, which has been estimated in accordance with the 1995 Provincial Municipal Service Exchange Agreement. So in total, our mandatory expenses are just over $31 million, a 5% increase, and are 40.5% of the total budget. Next, we have our contributions to the IMSA corporations, which account for about 8.4% of the proposed budget. You can find more details starting on page 65 of the agenda. And the two largest contributions go to Valley Waste and Tidal Transit, formerly King's Transit. The municipality's contribution to Valley Waste decreased by 16.3% to just over $4.6 million. Key budget influences there included the extended producer responsibility regulations, new revenue streams from handling and transporting residential recycling, increased tipping fee revenue, and implemental costs associated with the EPR program. The municipality's 26-27 contribution to Tidal Transit Authority totals just over $1.6 million, representing a 31.9% increase over the prior year. The increase is attributable to rising route operation and fleet maintenance costs, as well as enhanced capital contributions to support planned fleet renewal. Next, we have the legislative section of the budget, which begins on page 69 of the agenda package. Budgeted expenditures here include council remuneration, travel, meals, committee honorariums, municipal membership dues, and other legislative services. In total, we're at $886,000, which is a 7.1% increase over prior year. Next, we have the administrative department, which begins on page 72 of the agenda package, with tables on page 83 to 84 detailing the individual sections within the department. The administrative department covers the office of the CAO and the deputy CAO, and consists of things like recreation, diversity, economic development, human resources. The department has a total tax levy requirement of just over $4.6 million, which is an 11.5% increase over the prior year. Activity revenues include revenues generated from recreation programs, such as aquatics, day camps, and seniors programming, as well as some rental income. Grants relate to funding received from other levels of government for recreation programming and summer student positions. Transfers from other funds include carry forward amounts for consulting and studies required for ongoing special projects. Salaries, wages, and benefits reflect estimates for non-union rate increases set out in policy HR 06019, as well as unionized increases per the collective agreement. The increase to salaries is really driven, though, we've reallocated 1.7 full-time equivalents from the finance department over to administration just to align better with the reporting structure. Materials and supplies includes budgets for travel, telephone, public engagement initiatives, office supplies, and the accounts are reviewed annually and adjusted to be in line with actual spending and planned projects for the upcoming year, such as this year we have some one-time pool maintenance costs. Purchase services include consulting, insurance, legal fees, and training for all staff. And then within the administrative department, we do group our contribution over to the special projects in the capital budget. So that, again, that plays into some of the fluctuation in this department each year. Special projects are detailed on page 82 of the agenda package, and the amount included in the budget reflects only the portion of the project which will result in operating expenditures related to things like general consulting or improvements to non-owned assets. Interfund transfers grouped under the other debt and reserve transfers include funding of $369,400 going to the capital fund in relation to specific special projects. So along with the funding for special projects that are going to end up being an operating expense, we are also taking some tax revenue and allocating it to special projects, but this will end up being capitalized. So instead of showing it as an expense, we show it as a transfer to the capital fund. And this transfer would offset some of the decrease in special project spending that you're seeing. Other reserve transfers include the annual amount for upcoming elections and contributions to the IT capital replacement reserve. Next, we have finance and IT, which begins on page 85 of the agenda. This department has a net tax levy requirement of $4.6 million. However, of that, $1.6 million relates to the enhanced capital reserve contribution. So after normalizing for the enhanced contribution, the net department cost would actually be decreasing by 0.55%. And a big part of that would be the reallocation, again, of those full-time equivalents from finance over to the admin department. Next, we have the Engineering and Public Works budget, which begins on page 92 of the agenda. The EPW department has a net tax levy requirement of just over $4.13 million. And this consists of activity revenue, which comprises of streetlight area rates, revenue from power purchase agreements related to the solar panels on the municipal complex, administrative fees charged to other utilities and service areas. So we charge a fee to the municipal sewer, Greenwood Water, regional sewer for things like finance support, IT equipment, managerial support, things like that. So they pay an admin fee and the revenue shows up here in this department. Salaries, wages, and benefits reflect estimates for non-union rate increases and the unionized increases per the collective agreement with an allowance for vacant positions. And it should be noted that there's always a little bit of reallocation each year between the main EPW staff complement, and the staff complement is allocated to Greenwood Water, Regional Sewer. We use a historic average of hours at each location, so there was always a little bit of fluctuation between the general EPW department and then the different utilities. Material supplies and utilities include things like the municipal complex maintenance, power and water, maintenance and utilities for park facilities, and supplies and vehicles to support municipal staff. And these budgets reflect actual and planned usage. Purchase services include things like contracted services for janitorial, snow clearing, engineering consultant fees, lifeguard services, J-class road paving, and a portion of insurance. The increase in purchase services, which is 10.4% this year, relates primarily to the snow clearing budget. We had a new contract and service model introduced in 25-26, as well as the J-class road paving, which we're budgeting at $536,500 for the upcoming year. Had an increase to help service public demand for improved road conditions. The budget is based on the council-approved priority list of provincial J-class roads, along with an estimated cost per kilometer and an allowance for non-approval. All other accounts have been adjusted in line with actual costs, contract variables, and planned utilization. Transfers to reserve and debt service have increased 24.9%. This relates to growth in transfers to capital reserves, which is based on depreciation of department-related tangible capital assets. So as we increase our asset base, as we renew our asset base, annually the cost of that depreciation results in a larger transfer to the capital reserve. Next, we have a slide on streetlight revenue. So within the EPW budget, there are costs and revenue associated with streetlights, and these can be viewed on page 101 of the agenda package. An annual fee is charged to properties located within 100 feet of the service streetlight area. The fee is set on a cost recovery basis and used only to fund the costs directly related to providing the lighting. Streetlight fees correlate with power rates, and assuming no more than a 3% annual increase in power rates and annual 2% growth rate of properties within the service area, we've used those assumptions to come up with a fee schedule anticipated for the next few years. So we will see the fee for general rates is increasing by 50 cents to 42.5. And the Centerville rate is rising 25 cents to 4.75. And I will just point out that there was a typo in the published agenda, and the fee schedule is the actual planned budget for the streetlights. Next, we have the emergency management and fire protection budget section, which begins on page 103 of the agenda. On the revenue side, grants include funds received from the province for civic addressing. And in the expenditures, we have the salaries, including the emergency management coordinator position, as well as a portion of management salaries. Materials, supplies, and utilities are increasing to provide the flexibility required to respond to emergency situations, including the water distribution program that supported residents during the 2025 drought. So we have included some budget there in case the water program needs to be something that takes place again this summer, or if there's another program that is required to meet residents' needs. Purchase services include fire dispatch costs, generator and dry hydrant funding, and emergency funding. And we should note that for 26-27, negotiations regarding fire contracts are ongoing, and a contingent amount of fire department funding, not yet allocated to a specific department, has been grouped under purchase services for this year. Just as those contracts are being worked out, there may be some need for additional funds. Fire department funding is broken out on the next slide. So the municipality funds 13 fire departments. Operational funding is provided through the general tax rate, while capital funding is provided through area rates. This chart provides an overview of anticipated operating funding for the upcoming year. The municipality has entered into or is in the process of negotiating contracts with each fire department, and this chart is compiled based on recommended funding levels through submitted budgets and calculations derived from maximums set out in these contracts. And total fire funding is increasing 4.9%, which does not include the contingent amount budgeted under purchase services on the previous slide. Next, we'll move on to planning services. Their budget is shown on page 110 of the agenda package. Activity revenue here includes the sales of plans of data, and the budget is based on historic trends. Material supplies and utilities include things like telephone services, advertising, and office supplies. Budget estimates have been adjusted to better reflect anticipated actual costs. And it should be noted that the advertising expenditures that were previously here have decreased in 26-27 as there's been recent amendments to the MGA requiring or allowing us to advertise solely on our internal website. And then purchase services would include things like consultant and meeting costs. So in total, we have a $701,000 budget for the planning department. Next, we have the inspection and enforcement budget. This begins on page 111 of the agenda package and has a total budget of just 1.377 million. So here, activity revenue would be amounts received from other municipal units for providing inspection services, as well as village contributions to the Joint Accessible Advisory Committee, dog tag revenue, and other licenses. Under the salaries, this coming year, we have 2 assistant building officials who will complete their training and transition to building inspector roles. This will result in the division having a full complement of inspectors and will eliminate the need for contracted support. So that's making up the change in the salaries there, the 4.3% drop. Purchase services include animal control contract and the cost of the Joint Accessible Advisory Committee. So again, the inspection and enforcement budget is just over 1.37 million and is a 0.3% decrease over a prior year. Next, we have development services, which begins on page 113 of the agenda package and includes, it should be noted that this budget totals $429,300, but within it is $1.792,300 of Housing Accelerator Fund. So we have revenue and expenses within this budget that relate to the Housing Accelerator Fund. So activity revenue would include permitting and development application fees, and the budget is based on historic trends and anticipated activity. Grant funding relates entirely to the Housing Accelerator Fund. Material supplies and utilities would include things like telephone, travel, and supplies. The budget reflects anticipated actual costs. Purchase services relate entirely to the HAF funding programs, which are detailed on page 113 of the agenda package, and include things such as permit fee reductions, not-for-profit and cooperative housing grants, private sector applications for municipal infrastructure design, and wastewater connection grants for major developments. Reserve transfers would include transfers to the IT capital reserve based on a set amount per FTE. And again, additional details on the HAF funds can be seen on page 114 with a link to the dedicated page on our website, which gives full sort of project and overhead details. Next, the final general operating budget section are the grant programs, which you can find starting on page 116 of the agenda. And key highlights here would include a $50 increase to the personal property tax exemption amount, as well as 3 new applicants under the not-for-profit exemption stream. Community hall assistance has been increased by $20,000 to address growing needs, and a district activity fund has been added with a budget of $10,000. As well, the grants to organizations have been indexed with inflation. Other grant programs have been adjusted based on needs and contract parameters, with the biggest change coming from the crossing guard funding. The policy is undergoing review, so some additional contingent funds have been budgeted here. External providers have decreased as some of the contracts have expired without renewal, and the remaining providers are receiving funding consistent with the models in place. All other grant programs have funding consistent with prior years, so we've got no budget decreases to any of our grant programs, and full details on each type of grant are provided through pages 116 to 125 of the budget document. So in total, just over $4.393 million of grant funding to support our residents and communities. Next, we have the municipal sewer budget.
Should maybe we, before we go
Yep.
to the sewer, maybe we should. 'Cause
Absolutely.
You've given us a lot there, and so I'll maybe make a couple of comments and see if any of the council members have any questions, and that, rather than muddy the waters with the sewer, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
My quick observation, and maybe I'm going backwards a little bit, but I know in Mr. Livingston's presentation, where no staff increases, and then we're talking about no tax increase. But people sometimes forget that the mandatory funding that we have to provide is such a huge part of the budget, and in a case where maybe the assessment has gone up, we'll say 7% or whatever, we have mandatory funding like in policing that's going up 6% or maybe more. And then in some cases, we have increases up to 12%. So basically, I guess my question is, Katrina, is that, so it's kind of like a wash there, even though the assessments may be going up, so are some of these inflationary items that we have no control over. So it's not like all of a sudden we've got a lot of extra money coming into the county, because we also have a lot of extra expenses too. Is that a fair statement?
I would absolutely say that's a fair statement, and I feel like this budget has, the attempt of this budget has been to keep sort of what we do have control on, to the minimal amount of increases. And then also, of course, your mandatory expenses, your IMSA contributions grow every year. And this budget also has continued the theme of the past few years, where we've been trying to build up our capital reserves. So anything extra, we've really made the attempt to build up our capital reserves, as we know that there's a slight deficiency there. So in this budget, you saw under the finance and IT section, we're going to put $1.66 million over to capital reserves this year. So that's really been a focus as well.
Okay, thank you, and I think you're doing very well with your presentation, by the way. Now, so first we'll, with questions, Deputy Mayor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question is pertaining to the grants programs. I see an increase of 5.6%. I think that's a very positive thing. The reason being is that at the community level, there are a lot of initiatives that are important to community development. I know that for tax relief, there has been a pretty substantial increase, which is also another positive thing. My question is, the remainder of that increase of 5.6%, does that pertain to increased requests for grants, or are we seeing an inflationary bump into the existing grants because of the increased costs for the community groups? For example, if they were eligible for a grant of $7,500 in the previous year, has there been an inflationary bump to the percentage permitted in the 2026-27 year? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor or Deputy Mayor McPherson. Annually, we treat the grants much like any other department. We meet with the grant coordinator and management to determine if they're seeing a higher level of volume of applications in certain areas, if they're seeing, needs going unmet. This year, you do see that we've increased the CHAP budget by $20,000. That was based on their feedback as an area that they've seen increasing demand, as well as increasing the $10,000 district grant so that we can address sort of some of the smaller requests that come through. It was determined that many of the other grant streams are currently meeting the needs, and again, of course, those will be reassessed every year as part of the budget process, but the main highlights this year are that CHAP has increased, the GTO has been indexed with inflation, and then we've added the $10,000 district grant.
Councillor Sappington.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was wondering in regards to the daycare property tax exemptions, does that also, do home daycares qualify for that as well, or is it just institutional daycare centers that qualify for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sappington, I believe it is just the institutionals, but I would like to defer to our manager of revenue services will.
Yes, it is just the registered daycares, the larger operations,
I see. Thank you.
Just be noted that the daycare exemption brings the commercial rate down to a residential rate. That is correct, right? So the in-home daycares would already be, for the most part, at the residential rate.
Councillor Peckford.
Thank you. Through you. When it comes to purchase services, I saw an increase of about $1.8 million. Just wondering if there is a place we could go to find a more comprehensive breakdown in what those services would be. I know in the budget we did a brief overview on where it's going. Just wondering if there's a place we could see potentially even anything over $25,000, contract, IT services, training, everything like that. Just I get that question a lot. Seems general description of where it's going. I know it's cumbersome, but I've been asked a few times from members of the public just if there's a place they can see where that cost is coming down in terms of smaller groupings.
Director Livingston.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Peckford. We don't have that detail captured in this reporting. I'm not sure if this would be the correct sort of arena for that detailed level of information. Have some discussions around that through quarterly updates at Budget and Finance Committee, Audit and Finance Committee through the quarterly accountability reports. But for the format of this document, it wouldn't be appropriate, I think, to delve into that minute detail.
Just a follow-up on that, if I could. Would it be possible to get some of that information provided to us before we start voting on some of these increases and approvals? Just to see a bit more of a breakdown in how we're allocating some of these resources. Just want to make sure it's not too general in specifics.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we can look at what options we have for reporting that information to council and bring something forward.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Best.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We talked, the mayor talked about commercial. How much increase this year was in commercial? I was going to wait till the end of it, then I thought I might forget something. How much increase did we have in commercial?
So we had 3.4% of assessment growth, and we had 3.4% growth in tax revenue as well. There is a chart in the main body of the agenda package. I don't have the agenda package with me, but it details property tax line by line. And you can see the commercial tax right under the residential and the actual dollar figure if you.
Okay, thank you.
It should be under the revenue overview section of the budget.
But actually, we We had negative commercial growth last year. didn't
We did last year. This year we have
Negative.
positive.
Negative, compared to the year before, negative.
Wow.
But this year we're going back up.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, and I believe I think I know the answer, but with regards to streetlights, that 4250 number that I saw, that is only for people living within a certain distance of streetlights, is that correct? I
Yes,
believe it's 100 or 200 feet.
It is, I believe it's 100 feet. Let me just double check that though.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, so it's within 100 feet of a service streetlight area, and it is set out in policy finance 05003, if anybody wanted the full details on the streetlights.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peckford.
Thank you, through you. This is a question that I'm not 100% sure if it's the right time for it or at a future meeting, as Director Livingston might have noted. But for the Department of Public Works, is there provisions within this budget, and maybe I missed it, for them to have a running list of items that they may need to purchase and stockpile in order to meet demands for emergency repairs and breaks for sewer lines, water lines, culverts, anything like that? Just wondering if it's possible, if it's not there, we could get this added before the deliberations on the budget, to know what we may need to spend to stockpile some of these items if we want to pursue that avenue. And hopefully in the future, when we have emergency work needed, we have these items on hand. I was just wondering if that's something that maybe Director Kerrigan can speak to that a little bit.
Director.
I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if you could repeat the question, and I've got a hearing issue right now. If you could speak louder, that would be fantastic for me.
Yes, no, absolutely. I was just wondering if Department of Public Works has added to this budget a requirement for purchasing materials and products that we use regularly for emergency repairs. So if we have a sewer line break or a water line break, do we have the necessary components on hand to be able to fix and remedy the situation on, say, a Sunday when all the shops are closed without having to go to other municipalities to source these products and materials?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is a process that we have ongoing, so we are working towards that with our new asset management software. I wouldn't say we're at a point right now where we have a detailed list of exactly what we need, but items are being recognized by our manager of operations and our scheduler to make sure we have those materials on hand in our warehouse, so that when we do have an emergency, we have the materials on hand. We don't have to go to another municipality.
Perfect. So in this budget, is there provisions for that?
There's budget allocated for that, not a specific list. However, we would have monies budgeted in order to have those critical spares.
Okay, if you don't mind me asking, do you know what that provision is set aside right now, what the amount is? I know you don't have a specific, but just do you know what that general amount is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have an exact amount on that. I would have to confer with Katrina.
Okay, thank you.
We'd have to dig into it, is what we'd have to.
Director Livingston? There we go. Well, guess I'm gonna have to dump somebody here. All right, there we go.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Peckford, we'll report back on that exact detail and get you a report. We won't speak to it today and speculate, so we'll go take that away and bring it back.
Okay. Councillor Gates.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to maybe help Councillor Riley Peckford. I believe materials that would be in reserves, that we've set aside reserves under asset management to cover materials, so I don't think that would be operational, would fall under reserves, I believe, but maybe Brad could answer that question.
Okay, so we're gonna carry on. Katrina, and we'll move into the sewer. I don't see any other lights on. Good. That was, I thought, appropriate time.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. The next couple of slides will cover our sewer and our water utility budgets. beginning with the municipal sewer budget that can be found starting on page 118 of the agenda package. So, activity revenues, which include residential, commercial, and other sources, are increasing by 3.1%. So in addition to a rate escalation in line with Nova Scotia October CPI, so 2.6%, there are additional connections as well as sales of service agreements which are directly tied to specific costs, and all of those combined make up our activity revenue in the municipal sewer, which has a 3.1% increase. Transfers from the sewer operating reserves relates to carry forward funds budgeted for special projects. And then our salaries, wages, and benefits would reflect actual estimates for non-union rate increases in the unionized collective agreement. As well as mentioned before, there's always some small movement of FTE allocation between each of the utility locations based on hours spent in the past few years. So the maintenance and vehicle budgets would represent the best estimate of annual requirements and activity levels. They're based on a review of historic spending, inflationary indexing, and planned upcoming maintenance costs. So within the maintenance budget for each location, we would have, a sort of a borderline of what we spent in the past, what we've seen with the inflation has been doing with the specific materials, things like that, and then what we need to have on hand for any planned maintenance or emergencies, things like that. You'll see vehicle expenses are decreasing slightly in line with fuel costs, and maintenance costs are declining as fleet vehicles are replaced with newer vehicles. The maintenance costs tend to go down. So lift station and treatment plant power increases are primarily driven by rising power rates, along with increased consumption at some locations due to equipment upgrades and changes. So things like the blowers installed at Hans Border, they would have a direct correlation to the amount of power used, things like that. Additionally, the cost of disposal services has increased based on updated contract pricing, and the service fee paid to regional sewer has been adjusted. Administrative costs include liability insurance, overhead supplies, things like training, clothing, laboratory-related costs, as well as an administrative fee paid back to the municipality for services provided by the municipality. The transfer to reserve account is 22.6% of the budget, and the transfers are required to ensure that funds will be available as a component of future capital requirements. So the transfer to reserve in this municipal sewer budget goes entirely into the capital reserves. So it'll be there for future project needs. So in total, we have a municipal sewer budget of just over $6 million, which is a 3.8% increase over prior year. The next section is the regional sewer, which can be found beginning on page 129 of the agenda package. So the regional sewer system consists of the treatment plant in New Minas and a trunk collection system extending from Colebrook to the New Minas-Greenwich border and from parts of North Kemptville. The regional sewer system is a partnership among the municipality, the town of Kemptville, village of New Minas, and PepsiCo. Overall, the budget costs of the regional sewer system are increasing by 8% from 25-26 to just over $2.9 million. Of the $2.9 million, Kings is responsible for about 16.8%, with our contribution for 26-27 sitting at $493,660. So this charge would be picked up as an expense in the municipal sewer system. So under treatment plant, under the treatment plant line, this charge gets expensed to the municipal sewer. So again, at 26-27, we're at $493,660 contribution to the regional sewer. And last is the Greenwood Water Utility, which you can find beginning on page 131 of the agenda. So the Greenwood Water Utility is a regulated utility under the Public Utilities Act, and the utilities rates can only be changed through approval of the Nova Scotia RAB. In 2026, the Greenwood Water Utility is expanding with the construction of a new water treatment plant, as well as over 5 kilometers of water transmission main along Highway 201. This new treatment plant will allow for additional water capacity and system redundancy, as well as provide access to additional water customers in the Greenwood community. Assumptions are based on an increasing customer base, as well as additional operating expenses related to the expansion have been built into the budget. Activity revenue is projected based on existing customer base, expected new connections related to the expansion, and historical consumption. Other revenue represents interest earned on the utility's bank balances, as well as the amortization of capital grant funds. Materials, supplies, and utilities would include power, chemicals, maintenance, and vehicle-related costs. Budgets are developed using estimates of annual requirements and activity levels, informed by historical spending patterns, inflationary adjustments, and planned maintenance projects. For the expanded treatment facility, estimates are based on the best available information, as no historic financial data exists yet for the expansion, and these estimates will be refined in future years as new operating conditions are better understood at those locations. Purchase services includes things like insurance, our regulatory compliance expenses, water testing, and these things can fluctuate year over year based on required studies and water testing activities. So within the Greenwood Water Utility, 1 year a major study may be required, and that might be a semi-annual thing, so the budget will fluctuate annually based on what the compliance requirements are of that coming year. Debt and transfers to reserve include transfers to the depreciation reserve fund in line with anticipated annual depreciation expense, as well as debt service for existing and planned debentures. There is no projected change in rates for the upcoming year. However, a rate study is planned for 26-27 now that the major capital work is well underway. The use of accumulated surplus and capital grant funding has significantly reduced the amount of long-term debt originally anticipated for this project. However, rate adjustments are expected to be required in future years to fund the resulting debt service, operating cost increases, and depreciation increases. So that's the end of the utilities.
Okay, any questions to Katrina on that before we looking forward? No, I guess we're gonna move on, Katrina.
All right, included with the budget are multi-year operational projections, and can be viewed along with the assumption used starting on page 134 of the agenda package. So on page 134, we get into the section that's sort of forward-looking and is projecting out a few years to see where we think the operating budget is likely headed. So looking ahead, there are several external factors beyond the municipality's control that will continue to influence future budgets, including interest rates, annual assessment lift, inflation, mandatory payments. These remain a significant cost driver and account for approximately 40% of total operating expenditures. Additionally, inflationary pressures within operations will continue to contribute to increasing fiscal demands. So forecasts have also been prepared for the municipal sewer and Greenwood Water, which are available on page 138 and 139. And again, it should just be noted that Greenwood Water Utility is forecast subject to revision following the completion of the forthcoming rate study. So again, starting on page 134 of the agenda, we have some charts that sort of project things out a few years along with the major assumptions that we've used to compile those. Our final section will look at the operating reserves. So you can find this material starting on page 141 of the agenda. And you can see that in total, March 31st, 2025, and combined with all the operating reserve funds, had $19.3 million balance. We're forecasting this to grow to 22.3 million at the end of this fiscal year, so March 31st, 2026, and then to 24.2 million by March 31st, 2027. A significant amount of the reserve funds are in place for specific purposes, such as the municipal sewer, special project carry forward, the newly created Village Infrastructure Capital Enhancement Fund, and the deed transfer tax. So within the operating reserve budget section, there's a green chart that lists out every reserve with their projected balance. And the reserve policy will give you details on each of the purposes of those reserves. The chart on page 143 of the agenda package outlines the budgeted transfers from operating reserves, which totaled $2.346,500. So this is the total amount that we're forecasting to draw out in 26-27. Key transfers would include, we're going to take $83,000 for sewer projects, just over $2.1 million for special projects, and then some grant and contract spend of $75,990. So most of these reserve transfers reflect unspent project funds from prior years that have been carried forward for future use on these same projects. So this is money that's, for the most part, has been put into the reserve with the intention that it would eventually be drawn out for these projects. So again, in total, just over $2.3 million coming out of reserve in 26-27. The chart on page 143, the smaller chart outlines the budgeted contributions to operating reserves. So this is the money that we plan to put in from the operating budget, and this totals just over $4.272 million, with, again, the bulk of this coming from the deed transfer tax at just over $3 million, as well as we have $980,000 of Village Infrastructure Capital Enhancement Fund funding. So we've allocated $1,050,000 to the Village Capital Enhancement Program this year. This is the amount that it's anticipated the villages won't use and will carry forward for their use in future years. So this chart details every contribution to the operating reserves for 26-27, which is just under $4.3 million. Next, we'll look at some of the measures we use to ensure the reserves are in a healthy position. So the province annually publishes financial condition indicators for all 49 municipalities, including a measure comparing operating reserves to operating expenditures, excluding mandatory transfers. And a minimum of 20% is required to be considered low risk. Reserve levels provide greater flexibility to handle unexpected events, while lower levels will limit the municipality's ability to respond to financial pressures. Operating reserves also support multi-year projects and commitments, helping ensure stable planning and the ability to act on opportunities as they arise. So as you can see from the chart, the minimum threshold that the province would like to see is 20%. We're projecting that we'll be at 45.6% by the end of 26-27, which is not greatly changed from the past 3 years. In addition to the provincial financial conditional index, the municipality's own reserve policy, outlined on page 145 of the agenda, establishes specific thresholds for evaluating reserve adequacy. So as shown in this chart, the 26-27 budget is projected to exceed the policy's recommended threshold. Maintaining reserves above the level strengthens the municipality's long-term financial health and provides greater flexibility to respond to future needs and unforeseen events. So as you can see, this is where I was referencing earlier. We have two thresholds, one that looks at the reserves in total, so that would be the first line, and then the second line looks at just our operating reserve, our general uncommitted operating reserve. So you can see both of those are within the recommended policy threshold. Are there any questions on the operating reserves?
Okay. Thank you, Katrina, I want to say, I really appreciate you going at the pace that you've gone at so that some of us older fellows can keep up. So that was very, very good. And my first impression is that we're certainly holding the line, and that's a great thing. Councillor Lutz.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, just looking at that section regarding looking forward, and you said you operated on some assumptions, and I'm assuming that some of those assumptions were that the tax rate remained the same on all those projected years forward. So the tax rate stays at 85.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lutz, that is correct. The assumptions are just the average assessment growth that we've seen with regard to the commercial and residential assessment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to encourage any lights on. It sounds like you did a fabulous job, because that's an indication, or they've already asked all their questions. So
Thank you.
we'll go to next steps, Katrina.
Yeah, so next week we will have, on March 25th, we'll have a detailed presentation on the capital budget. And then following that, we'll start deliberations on April 1st. We'll have our first round of deliberations. If things come out of deliberations that require change or updates, then we would have a second round of deliberations on April 21st.
Okay, so we have a recommendation, Council, that the Committee of the Whole receive the March 17th, 2026 presentation of the 2026-2027 proposed operating utility and reserve budget as information. Moved by Councillor Sappington, second by Councillor Best. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay, so you were the seconder, Councillor Best. Are you voting for it or against? You try another finger. All right, motion carried. I think at this time we'll call a 10-minute recess. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order now that we're through our the budget process. And before we get into item number 8, at this time, I'd like to mention that we lost a very valuable member of our Kings County community who lived in the town of Kentville. Art Hamilton passed away. Art was 43 years in the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department, a very well-respected person in the community, long-time volunteer, and unfortunately it was something that was not expected, so it was a sudden thing which would be devastating to the family and community. So at this time, I would ask that we do a moment of silence for Mr. Art Hamilton. Thank you, and I would be remiss if I didn't say Art's son, Scott, is the current fire chief of the Kentville Fire Department. So we would pass on our condolences to his wife Sylvia, Scott, and daughter Karen, and the family. All right, now we'll move on, item 8, and we have one of our own, Councillor Robbie Hiltz, is going to speak to an item and get you to turn your light on, Councillor Hiltz. And it's all about fly fishing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. My name's Robbie Hiltz. I'm a resident of Somerset, District 3. And I decided to, well, thank you first for the opportunity for this presentation. So the story behind this fly and the whole concept is a fly tying mentor. He's passed away recently. His name was Bill Carpin. He was from Stillwater, which was very close to the St. Mary's River and a legendary spot for Atlantic salmon. And in 2006, he was in a competition. He had won that competition, and it was for the official fly of Nova Scotia. So he had taken different materials of his fly, and what he did, each one represented something significant. So the tinsel, like the bright body you can see on the fly there behind the red in the back, his represented Atlantic salmon. He had different colors in it representing the flag of Nova Scotia. So anyway, that's where this concept started. And it was several years ago I thought about it, and then it didn't materialize. So over that time, I had tied a few for different businesses, for some books, and of course, I sold some commercially. And anyway, just ran out of time doing it. So I decided to get it back into, projects like this, just to promote the sport, the art of fly fishing. And and of course, the beautiful area that we live. So that was the origin of this. I have been asked a few times, so the ghost, why is it called the ghost? So the story of that, and actually this design of fly, it started in 1924 by a lady named Carrie Stevens in Rangeley, Maine. So at that time, a lot of sports from the United States would travel there for the brook trout. And so her husband was a guide, and one day she decided to tie a fly called the gray ghost, and the same style but just different colors to imitate a smelt. And story goes, she had caught a 6-pound, 13-ounce fish, and then the fly became famous. It's probably the most famous worldwide fly when it comes to the streamers, and it was called the gray ghost. So the idea of the ghost is, so the blue feather there, When it's in the current, of course, it mimics almost like a ghostly appearance. So that's the history behind that. Anyway, I just, so kind of, I love the craft, I love the sport, like to promote it. I have deep pride in this county, just the land, and of course when we go through the whole body of the fly, it kind of represents, everything, or a lot of aspects of the beautiful place that we live. Anyway, so that's where it kind of stemmed from, and I'd love to see it. I know there's a vote for it. I'd love to see it become the official fly of the county, and perhaps put up in the lobby for residents to enjoy when they come in to do business. And thank you for the opportunity, and any questions are welcome.
Great, thank you, Councillor Hiltz, and it's certainly an honor to have talented people here on Kings County Council, and we're certainly honored to put your the ghost of Kings County streamer fly up in the lobby, and where everyone can recognize it. And it's like I say, we're very fortunate to have a lot of talented people. And I told you, Deputy Mayor, that Councillor Hiltz was talented, and you questioned me on that. But anyway, anyone else has any great talents, we're welcome to bring them forward. And we do have a recommendation here that the Committee of the Whole recommend Municipal Council approve the fly fishing streamer to become the official fly of the municipality of the County of Kings, and hang it in the main entrance of the municipal building for all residents to enjoy. Do we have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Gates, second by Councillor Peckford. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay. All right, yeah. You might have a conflict of interest, yeah. We're not paying you for it anyway, so. All right. Motion carried. Thank you, Councillor Hiltz. Now we will continue to move on with our board and committee reports, and the first one is number 9A, Diversity Kings County. The report was submitted by Councillor Sappington. Do you have anything to add, Councillor Sappington?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any questions to Councillor Sappington? No. All right. We'll move on. Is there any verbal reports from other committees of council? No. Then external boards. Are there any verbal reports from any external boards? All right, so I guess we need one motion to receive all the reports for information. Moved by Councillor Allen, second by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay, Councillor Best, you voted in favor? Okay, motion carried. All right. Motion to receive correspondence. Moved by Councillor Allen, second by Councillor Harding. I guess the actual motion was that the Committee of the Whole receive correspondence as attached March 17th, 2026 agenda for information. All those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Okay, and you voted for, okay. Motion carried. All right. We do have now a request from Antigonish Coalition to End Poverty. And if the Committee of the Whole wishes to send a letter in response to the request from Antigonish Coalition to End Poverty, we would need to pass a recommendation to Council to do so. If there is a mover and a seconder of the motion, we would direct myself to send a letter to the municipality in support of Antigonish Coalition to End Poverty. The actual motion would be that Committee of the Whole recommend Municipal Council direct the Mayor to send a letter to the municipality of the County of Antigonish in support of the Antigonish Coalition to End Poverty. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Harding, second by Councillor Lutz. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify, all those in favor or against, please vote accordingly. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is for information that Kings is participating in the INMC Startup Pitch competition happening at Devour Studios on April 16th, and that we are also involved with the International Network of Michelin Cities. By the way, Michelin covers most of that expenses for the flight and accommodations for attendees. Okay, and that was just for information. So we're moving on to other business. Is there any other business to be brought forward to council? Okay, Councillor, where's my little mousey? Councillor Gates.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to question the April 1st deliberation for the budget. Will it be after noon, before noon? It's April Fool's Day, so.
You're not the only one that's got talent, Councillor Hiltz, but I'm not allowed to tell you what I think of his. All right. We'll move on to comments from the public. And I guess that's going to be a little short today. So I would now declare that we are adjourned. You want a motion? No. We're good. With all the power and the grace of the mayor, I declare we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.